This video is brought to you by Captivating History. During the Great Depression in Britain, when poverty was rife, the inequalities in society became increasingly obvious. The potential of the political ideology of communists to change this had never seemed so enticing, with many younger intellectuals becoming members of the British Communist Party. In the early 1930s, the Soviet Union needed more recruits to help their cause abroad. These idealistic youngsters were ideal candidates. 5 of these young men, Anthony Blunt, Guy Burgess, Donald MacLean, Kim Philby, and John Cairncross, were recruited to serve Russia. The consequences of their actions altered the course of World War II and the Cold War, with their roles remaining undiscovered until the 1950s. Since its inception over 2 centuries ago, the political ideology of communism has centered on the ordinary worker and equality for all. Unlike capitalism, communist organizations did not run for profit and promised to give citizens free healthcare, education, and reasonable working conditions. Founded on the principles of the Communist Manifesto, written in 1848 by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, communism aimed to end class division and reward every ordinary section of society. Unlike socialism, communism called for a workers' revolution. The manifesto was considered a highly influential work for the ideology and an integral part of revolution for European countries that wanted to free themselves from monarchies. In 1917, Russia launched a full-scale revolution. The royal Romanov family, including Tsar Nikolai II, was arrested and executed by Vladimir Lenin. The monarchy was removed, and Lenin became the leader of Russia, creating the Red Army and the U.S.S.R, where he remained in power until 1924. 1922 saw Joseph Stalin begin to seize power as leader of the Communist Party when Lenin suffered a stroke. Although Lenin initially trusted Stalin, he was shocked to discover the violent nature of Stalin's links to maintain power. Stalin's version of Marxism had become warped. The country remained secretive about food inequality and mass murders. This meant other nationalities could still believe in its principles, so much that they would betray their own countries. Students Donald MacLean, Guy Burgess, Kim Philby, Anthony Blunt, and John Cairncross all attended Cambridge University together, graduating in the early 1930s. These students came from various successful households with backgrounds ranging from tradespeople to bankers, which accounted for their interest in Marxism. Due to their class and political viewpoints, many of these students felt like outsiders. The Communist Party represented what many of these idealists valued. During their studies at Cambridge, Philby and Burgess met each other at the Trinity Historical Society, where Burgess was the leader. Burgess, who already had quite left-wing beliefs, had previously attended the classist Eton College, winning a Cambridge scholarship. Philby had already joined the Soviet ministry when he recommended Burgess to Soviet intelligence officer Arnold Deutsch. Deutsch, who is often referred to by the codename Otto, wanted British recruits to spy for the U.S.S.R. and gain access to the political elite. And who would be in a better position to do this than educated upper and upper-middle-class young men who were sympathetic to their cause? And so began the formation of a team of 5 members sent to infiltrate key areas of British intelligence, security, and foreign affairs, and collect information for the Soviet Union. Anthony Blunt was a young professor at Cambridge when he became involved with the Soviet cause. He met Guy Burgess at the Cambridge Apostles Group, where there were rumors that they had a short-lived affair. Blunt told interviewers years later that he was drawn towards the ideology because of Guy. It is unclear exactly when Blunt signed on with the NKVD, but it is suspected that this happened around 1933 to 1934. Originally a police task force, the NKVD had changed dramatically under Stalin. Now it was involved in the so-called cleansing of rich landowners and ethnic minorities, which were kept secret from the rest of the world. Blunt was also a very efficient double agent. Not only was he a member of the NKVD, but he had also joined MI5. Working with British military intelligence, Blunt could access German transmissions, decode them, and send them to the Soviets. Burgess graduated in 1935 without a postdoctorate or teaching position. After acquiring an extremely well-paid finance job through family connections, he then had the means to travel to Germany. Here, Burgess researched the Nazi movement by setting up the Anglo-German Fellowship for Nazi supporters, including 50 members of the British Parliament, bank directors, and military leaders. It aimed to improve relations between the two countries and provide a guise for the already staunch communist spy. In 1936, Burgess secured a position as an assistant manager in the talks department of the BBC. This job gave him access to many high-profile individuals as he set up interviews. While Burgess was working for the BBC, the British Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, contacted him to complete a few tasks. At the same time, the Soviets asked him to befriend author David Footman, a member of MI6. From there, Burgess became a part-time volunteer. In this undercover role, he was responsible for exchanging communications between British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and French President Édouard Daladier on the summit in Germany in 1938. Burgess became frustrated with his job with the BBC, which eventually led to his resignation. That same year, he was given a full-time job in MI6. Already employed by the Soviets, he was now a well-connected double agent. Donald MacLean applied to the civil service after graduation, despite his very vocal support of communism during his college years. By 1935, he was the first of 5 spies to have secured a government job in the British Foreign Office in London. Here, he had access to highly confidential information. Initially, the role was concerned with Spain, Portugal, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. Eventually, it widened its scope to include Germany, Italy, and the U.S.S.R. However, MacLean's biggest role was working with a group concerned with ending the Spanish Civil War. In Spain, a civil war broke out in 1936 between democratically elected President Manuel Azaña and right-wing parties that aimed to bring General Franco to power through a coup d'etat. It was a battle between left and right, with Franco enlisting help from Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. The Soviets wanted the left to emerge as the victor. MacLean was part of the Non-Intervention Committee group in the UK, who monitored communications between warring factions in Spain. The committee aimed to end the civil war as soon as possible by preventing the free flow of information between parties in Spain. MacLean stole endless documents and information from the committee, sending them to Stalin throughout this civil war. Although the U.S.S.R. did not directly involve itself, they sold weapons to the left in exchange for gold. Despite this, 3 years later, Franco was in power. When World War II started in 1939 and Germany invaded Poland, Britain increased its intelligence resources. The Cambridge Five were already firmly in place in many of these organizations. Cairncross and MacLean in the Foreign Office, Burgess in MI6, Philby at the War Office, and Blunt with MI5. From the onset of the war, the Soviet Union had stated its opposition to Germany. It sided with Great Britain and the Allies. However, Britain never trusted the U.S.S.R. completely, so the spies were tasked with providing the Soviets with extra information. Although the Soviets stood on the right side of World War II, Stalin killed anyone in Russia who threatened his position. Also, unbeknownst to Britain, the Red Army had been killing prisoners of war. The British double agents adapted, as was needed, to the circumstances. Philby infiltrated the CIA and MI6, while Donald MacLean observed meetings between Prime Minister Winston Churchill and U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt at the British Embassy in Cairo, Egypt. It was intended as a precursor to another later meeting in Iran, which would include Stalin. Things became heated between Churchill and Roosevelt, who failed to agree on France's best course of action. MacLean, who oversaw this meeting, informed Stalin's agents of the outcome. Both Anthony Blunt and John Cairncross worked at Bletchley Park, where daily secret communications and code-breaking were conducted. Their jobs involved passing on information to the Soviets that the UK had omitted. As time went on, these messages became more and more difficult to decode, and the Germans developed a unique encoding machine, the Enigma. Mathematicians and cryptoanalysts such as Alan Turing were recruited to help at a secret facility in the town of Bletchley, England. As war broke out in Europe, Turing designed and built a machine called Colossus to crack several complex codes. This decoding project worked well in the Cambridge Five's favor, as John Cairncross, who had studied German, conveniently ended up at Bletchley as a translator. Once Turing deciphered the messages, Cairncross would rewrite them in English and pass them on to NKVD agents. Cairncross decided that sharing all these vital German communications would help both Britain and Russia. This moral justification of fighting fascism led him to share important information with the Russians about the specific location of the German Air Force, or Luftwaffe. This information had a massive effect on the outcome of the war. In 1943, the Battle of Stalingrad had taken its toll on both sides. The Soviets had secured the city, but only after 500,000 casualties. German troops struggled to survive on the outskirts of the city. Stalin, still determined, sent reinforcements to remove the Nazi threat by attempting to isolate the remaining groups of troops. Gathering over 1,000,000 soldiers, thousands of tanks, and hundreds of aircraft, Stalin was determined to save their city. However, Russia's plans changed once their intelligence teams received information from Cairncross. The Germans were planning to attack the city of Kursk, and Cairncross had the locations of their airfields. The ensuing battle lasted only a week before Hitler retreated. The Russians were so well prepared for the battle that the Germans never even managed to break their lines. In 1943, a United States counterintelligence program known as Venona was launched. Venona was focused on finding secret communications from organizations such as the KGB, the NKVD, and the main intelligence directorate. This project was critically important to all allies by the end of World War II in 1945. The UK and Russia had stopped communicating with each other as the Cold War started, and Russia was already a guarded nation. This induced even further paranoia as the Iron Curtain split Europe in two. Kim Philby was sent to Washington, D.C. in 1949 to represent MI6 and work with the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. Philby cooperated well with the organizations during his stay, enjoying a close friendship with Chief of CIA Counterintelligence James Jesus Angleton. This relationship may have also given Philby access to highly confidential data that was above his pay grade. 1944 became a dangerous time for the Cambridge Five. The CIA had set up systems to intercept intelligence communications with the U.S.S.R. Many of these transmissions contained their code names. That same year, Philby had also turned on a Soviet defector who was a potential threat to his cover. Project Venona gained some serious ground once it established that there had been a significant amount of duplicated information transmitted directly to the KGB. Meredith Gardener, an American linguist and codebreaker, cracked the code, which revealed that the Soviets knew of the American nuclear program, Project Manhattan. This realization proved beyond doubt that there were spies nestled within the nuclear research facilities. Philby then warned his counterparts of the threat before sharing this information with the Russians. This escalated the nuclear arms race as the Soviets and the U.S. stockpiled thousands of nuclear warheads, contributing to the Cold War. 4 years after World War II, the Allied nations tried to destabilize the Soviet Union by infiltrating communist Albania. Although separate from the Soviet Union at the time, Albania had a strong economic relationship with them. Both American and British agencies worked together to recruit Albanians and anti-communists to wreak havoc on the country by starting a civil war. However, even after sending many teams in over the years, this did not prove successful. Kim Philby had worked on this project from the start, keeping the Soviets consistently up to date about each attempt. This allowed Russians to warn the Albanians. While many lives were saved from the potential civil war because of Philby's actions, most of the insurgents were also killed. Project Venona ended the Cambridge Five. The first to suspect that they were in danger of being discovered was Kim Philby, then staying in Washington. At that time, Philby lived with Burgess, who was asked to return to London and warn Donald Maclean. By the end of the summer of 1951, both Burgess and Maclean disappeared into the Soviet Union. Burgess died in 1963 from liver failure. The sudden disappearance of Maclean and Burgess was easily traced back to Philby. The CIA threatened MI6, stating that the organizations would no longer work together if Philby was not fired. Instead, he resigned and was cleared of all espionage charges in 1955. MI6 even hired him back to work in the Middle East. In 1963, Philby confessed to a Secret Service friend, Nicholas Elliott, before defecting to the Soviet Union to avoid arrest. He died in 1988, having never acclimated to Russia. Blunt had developed a relationship with many royals during and after the war, earning a knighthood in 1956. Blunt's cover was blown in 1964 when he was identified by a former Soviet spy living in America. The British intelligence offices and royals agreed to keep his confession a secret in exchange for him naming other spies. One of these was John Cairncross. Blunt would be publicly outed in 1979 as a spy by British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and his knighthood officially removed. He died in 1983. In 1952, John Cairncross made a full confession without an investigation even being launched. He was fired from his position in the British Exchequer, the second highest high-ranking minister of the Crown, and moved to the U.S. to lecture. He found a new life with French literature, eventually moving to Rome. His role as a Soviet spy did not become public until the 1970s. However, he avoided the limelight by living abroad until the last year of his life in 1995. Donald MacLean was the only member of the group to have succeeded in a communist society. After learning Russian, he worked at a magazine called International Affairs. He was offered various positions within the Soviet Foreign Ministry and Institute of World Economy and International Relations. He also received the Order of the Red Banner of Labor Award for his work for the Soviet Union. He died in 1983. None of these double agents were ever charged for their role in World War II and the Cold War. Many researchers believe that far more operatives were working for the Soviets and remain undiscovered to this day. Other former Cambridge students that were connected with the Five have all been considered as other potential suspects. Still, for now, it is merely all speculation. To learn more about British double agents working for the Russians, you can check out our book, The Cambridge Five, a captivating guide to the Russian spies in Britain who passed information to the Soviet Union during World War II. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free Mythology Bundle ebook while still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.